Yes, you could say about the House of Lords
Okay,
story.
House of Lords, Sahara. In my opinion, that was the best House of Lords album, ever. And I think because the process was, and a funny story that not too many people know is our biggest single was a remake of Blind Faith's "Can't Find My Way Home," and that recording is the demo that we did because Gene Simmons loved James's vocal on that. And then when Gene Simmons came into the studio, he was telling James the last time, he's like, "Yeah, I want you to get that, thing in your voice where it sounds like your voice is just gonna burn out any second." And he goes, "That's on that demo. I want to get that. I want to hear that." And so Gene Simmons comes in the studio and he looks at James and goes, "You did it. You got it." And we didn't really want to tell him, well, that's the 12-track demo that we put on the 32-track machine. We redid the bass and drums and mixed it, and that was our biggest song ever. So it goes to show you that, if you listen really closely on the CD, you'll hear the hiss, like the little hiss in the background on that song. There's more hiss on that song than there is on the other songs, like a lot.
Hello, guys. You are from Alma Hard channel, and today we have an interview here we talk with Ken Mary here from Flotsam and Jetsam, who played drums and recorded with several artists as Bonfire, House of Lords, Angel, and Alicee Cooper. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe here to the channel, turn on the notifications to receive all the new content here. So Ken, how are you? I think you hope you like it to join us today.
I'm doing very well, Nathalie. How are you?
I'm fine too. And so I'd like to say thank you to join us today. So let's
thank you.
start.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you. So let's start. Leandro, you have the first question.
Yes. Ken, I read in the comments review about the album Eight of Chaos, which said Ken Mary drums gave the band an upgrade with all the feels, tons of the fury speed. What else can we say that two inputs in the band contributed to the Flotsam since then?
Well, I think really, it's honestly, it's not just drumming. I think that there's a lot of other things. I am a producer and an engineer, and I think the thing that sort of makes the last three albums really kind of special is there's a chemistry. I think, everybody in the band's a writer. Mike's a writer, Steve's a writer, AK's a writer, I'm a writer, and Bill's a writer too. And on this album, we had several songs that Bill wrote that we wanted to do, but we actually ran out of time. We didn't have the time to actually put it on this album. So, I think with so many writers in the band, I think that, the big thing is that we're able to write a lot of material, and then we're able to make a record from the best songs. And so we have we have a ton of songs left over, and probably 5 or 6 that were great songs that we just didn't have the time or the space to put on this record. So, we actually have some songs that we felt would be perfect on this album, and just not enough time to really finish the record. So I think the thing that makes this particular group of guys special is just the chemistry. There's a real, I try to describe it to people. They say, well, what is Flotsam like? And I say, it's like 5 guys in 5 race cars on a narrow street, and we're going, all of us push the pedal all the way down, and we're going down the street at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and somehow we don't crash, and we don't know how. Like we're all playing all the things that we want to play, and we're putting in whatever we want to put in, and somehow it's all meshing together and makes music that sounds good, and we're not really sure why.
Yes.
I think on September 30, the new album called I Am the Weapon will be released. And from what I heard, what you can expect of from the old Flotsam. How did you choose the songs for this album?
Well, the way we chose the songs for this record, we usually demo up a bunch of songs. In this case, I think we ended up demoing up like maybe 16 or 17 songs, and we had even more that we just didn't finish demoing up, but that were there that we like and we felt strongly about. But what we try to do, and you've probably heard us say this in other interviews, but it really is true. For us, we try to make music because as a music producer, I've worked with bands and they say, well, we don't really like this song, but we're going to put it on the album. And I'm like, time out. Like, if you don't like the song, why should anybody else like the song? Like, nobody should like the song. So we really try to create songs that we love, that we really feel moves us, that makes us feel something. What is it? Is it sad? Is it angry? Is it energy? Is it, what emotion? We're trying to make music that moves us. So that's how we choose the songs. We choose the songs, we all listen to them and we go, yeah, this one is working, this one's working. And I think we're all writers. And so we all kind of know, like, okay, this one's working. This one maybe needs to be fixed. Maybe we need a new chorus on this, or, this needs a new verse, or this bridge section isn't working. So we all kind of know when it's right, and we all kind of know when it's not right. And so, that I think really helps. I think it helps us make some, I think the last 3 albums have been really pretty amazing records, in my opinion. It's like, I'm a Flotsam fan. I was a fan of the band before I was in the band, and now that I'm in the band, it's like I should hate listening to these records because I've heard these songs like 9 million times by the time we're done making the record, and I still really enjoy listening to them. So, I think we might be onto something. I certainly hope so.
So I have to say, you mentioned that you work as a producer and an engineer. How did you start to work this? How was your how did you get this interest for this area?
I think the interest probably came from being somewhat frustrated. Like when we were very young and we would go into the studio, you have a picture in your head, or you have a sound in your head that you're expecting to be there. And then when I was very young and we were recording, now this is back in the day, with 2-inch tape and you didn't have Pro Tools, or, you didn't have a computer at home that you could just go work on. And so I would get frustrated not hearing what I wanted to hear. And so fortunately for me, just like Leandro mentioned, I'm on a lot of different records. And so I was able to work with some of the greatest producers in music history, guys like Andy Johns that produced some small bands, like Led Zeppelin and Van Halen, and Michael Wagner, who worked with, Ozzy Osbourne, Metallica, Megadeth, Mac, who worked with a little band called Queen. These are all, these are producers that sold hundreds of millions of records. And so, I was very fortunate to work alongside of them and really tried to learn as much as I could. So that really started me in my production. And then when I got older, I started my own studio and started producing other bands, and they started getting record deals and started getting picked up by other companies. So that's sort of just, then I started getting calls from companies saying, hey, would you like to produce this band, or would you want to produce this band? So it's something that just sort of happened organically. I didn't necessarily, I didn't really seek it out. Like, I think when I originally started, I just wanted to make a studio so that I could make my own songs and make the quality, of the way that I wanted to hear them. And that's really the way I started. And then people heard my music and, wanted me to produce their bands. So that's how that started.
Nice. Yeah. So, Leandro, any questions?
Yes. On the previous album, Blood in Water, the composition, the production process were difficult due to the pandemics. Was the recording, production, the creation process this time in this album, I'm a Weapon, was easier?
Yeah, I don't think that Blood in the Water was necessarily difficult. I mean, it was a little weird because we would stay away from each other. And even when AK would come into the studio to sing, he would be in the tracking room and I would be in the control room. And they're two different rooms with two different doors. So, I would see him through the glass and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And, we would record vocals and everything, but we would never be in the same room together. So I think that it was a little bit different. I think it was a little bit, I'm not going to say more stressful, but I think it was the mood on that record, I think is a pretty aggressive, dark mood. And I think that that's probably, some of it was what we were feeling. We all lost some friends during that period. And, that's reflected in songs like Cry for the Dead and there's songs like The Walls and where your hopes and dreams are getting shattered because we had some situations where, we were supposed to tour, we were supposed to, you wanting to do all these things and all of a sudden you can't and all of a sudden you're stuck. So I think that gave that album a pretty aggressive sort of dark feeling. And with the new album, I Am the Weapon, it's still dark and it's aggressive. But I think maybe that heaviness is, that the whole COVID vibe is maybe not there, which I think is good for this album. I think it's a different record, still very aggressive. But at the same time, I think there's a little bit of, there's some dark songs for sure, but there's also some songs that are more like, you could tell we're having a good time.
Yes. And which songs from the I'm a Weapon represents the album most?
Wow, that's a very tough question because the album is a little diverse. There are songs like New Kind of Hero, and that's almost like a dark sense of humor sort of thing. Like it's sort of a song about, if Superman's dead, who's the new hero that takes his spot and what's this guy like? And this guy is different. He's a different kind of guy. He's like, hey, I'm going to save you. I got some things I got to go do for a while. I know you're hanging off the cliff. I'll get to it. I'm a little busy right now. So, it's like almost a tongue-in-cheek kind of, it's a little humorous, but it's dark humor. And then there's songs like I Am the Weapon that are just very aggressive and just, punch you in the face. And then there's other songs like Head of the Snake, which are, kind of angry. It's another kind of angry type of song. So, it's just, I would say that probably the majority of the songs are probably, in terms of the feeling, the emotion is probably energy and aggression are probably the most. But then there are some different songs too. And I think New Kind of Hero is one of those where it's maybe just a little more playful than some of the other songs.
Yes.
You were at Summer Breeze Festival on the first day, I think, so sharing the stage with Exodus, Mr. Big, and Jenny Simons. How did you feel coming to Brazil for the first time? Was it your first time here in Brazil?
That was my first time, and maybe Leandro knows this because he knows House of Lords, but I did work with Gene Simmons for several years when I was in House of Lords, so I actually knew Gene. I didn't get to see him this time because we didn't cross paths, but in terms of, this was my first time in Brazil, and the people are wonderful. It's a wonderful country. We really had a great experience, and I think that the crowd was wonderful, and that's all I can really say. I mean, I have nothing bad to say at all. So it would probably be more interesting if I had something bad to say, but they took really good care of us, and everything was very professional and on time, and we were very well taken care of. So I just think it was a great experience, and we're very happy that we came down for that.
Nice.
Great. And like I said in the beginning of the interview, impossible not mention Fifth Angel, right? About your career.
Sure.
And I want to know, the second album, Time Will Tell, it's absurd and amazing. Why do you believe the album wasn't successful as deserved?
Well, that's a tough question. I think there's a number of factors. People, they don't understand that there's many things that have to happen on the business level. You can have a great album, but you also have to have great management. You have to get on a great tour. You have to have the radio stations pick it up. Back in that day, it was like MTV, radio. Those were extremely important. Getting on big tours was also super important. So, it was a little bit of a situation where, I think we made a great record. It was a great thing for me. I got to work with producer Terry Brown, who was one of, I was a huge Rush fan when I was young. So, he recorded all the Rush albums that were my favorite albums, like Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures and 2112. And so I had the opportunity to work with Terry Brown, which was fantastic. As far as why it didn't do better than it did, it's really hard to say. I mean, there were a number of factors. I think one of them was that the music scene was changing. This is right before grunge, and then grunge hit and sort of, took out everything, at least in the United States. I know it didn't really in Europe. And I know that in Europe, Fifth Angel was, still very respected. But we lost our record deal in the United States, and that was sort of it for us at that time. Later on, we were obviously picked up by Nuclear Blast, which was great. But, back in that day, why wasn't it bigger? It's hard to say. I just think there were some business pieces of the puzzle, that didn't come to fruition. And I think one of those was touring. We were not able to secure a tour during that time. And I think that was a big negative.
Yeah,
you did the right record at the wrong time, maybe. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that could be too. That's very possible. I mean, I almost think that those records were timeless. And when we did the Third Secret, we were very nervous because those first two albums are considered classics in Europe and maybe in Brazil too. I don't know, but in Europe, those are considered metal classics. So we were very nervous about putting out any new material because we don't want to do anything that's going to denigrate that legacy. And so, it was a little nerve-wracking coming out with new material as well.
Yes.
You mentioned, I thought in the beginning of the interview that you worked with Alicee Cooper. So you recorded "Raise your first and yell." That's favorites, Leandro's favorite album. So
nice.
We can say that's a heavy metal band for album from Alicee Cooper. Do you believe your style influenced to the recording, to the process of the recording? Because as you know, Alicee Cooper it's something like more tends more to the classical something because it's from the 60s, 70s. So
right, sure. Well, if you're asking me, did I have an effect on that album? Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I had an effect because of the way I play, for sure. But also, the people that had a big effect were, Kane Roberts, who was the guitarist. He had a tremendous effect on that album. So did Kip Winger. He was playing bass on that. And I think that, again, whenever it comes to an album, there's always a chemistry that happens with the people. Sometimes it's a great chemistry. Sometimes it's not a great chemistry. I think in that case, I think it was a great chemistry. And I think it's probably one of Alice's heaviest records. And, there's some people, especially in Europe, they call it Metal Alice, like that was his metal period. And I think it was a great period. If you look at those tours we did, those were Alice's biggest tours ever. As a headliner, I don't even think the tours they did when they were in the 70s. I mean, there's a couple shows they played like the Los Angeles Coliseum and things, but we were playing Joe Louis Arena, 22,000 seats, sold out 3 nights. We were live on MTV, which was an estimated 20 million people watching. We were playing the Reading Festival. I mean, these were huge tours. We were playing coliseums and arenas, the entire tour. Yeah. And if you look back in the 70s when they were touring at their heyday, they were playing smaller places. They were playing like Cobo Hall in Detroit, and they're playing smaller venues. So with the exception of maybe Madison Square Garden, I mean, that was a big one. I think they did play with the original band later. But in terms of the overall attendance and overall numbers, I'm pretty confident that those tours that we did were the biggest tours of Alice's career, I believe. I think. I mean, I may be wrong, but I do think
I agree with you. I think that's in that time in the 80s was the best time for Alice Cooper. Because as you said, in the 70s was different because it was the beginnings, the different songs. I think that's for me, in my opinion, too. That's my point of view, too.
I'm suspicious because I only have the albums from the 80s and 90s.
Okay.
I like all the albums for Alice Cooper. I love the 70s, but I think, yes, the 80s is something like, wow, like this, you know.
Well, and, I love the 70s records, and we were, we played all those songs, but we made them more aggressive. And as far as, I go back and listen to, No More Mr. Nice Guy at School's Out. I remember being a kid, hearing School's Out on the radio, and so, for me, it was like, it was an honor, to tour with Alice and play those songs. It really was an honor. So I love his old stuff. I love the stuff we play. I love a lot of his new stuff. So, again, I'm an Alice Cooper fan. I mean, I was a Flotsam and Jetsam fan before I was in Flotsam and Jetsam. And, so I can't say that with Fifth Angel because I started in Fifth Angel. That was my high school band. But in terms of, my career, I'm usually a fan of the bands that I'm working with. So, I was a fan of Alice Cooper. He's an amazing artist. I mean, he brought theater into music, and that was that nobody had done that. Nobody had done that prior to him. So that was really something magical and special, in my opinion.
Yes. So
can you name a difference? Back into the Flotsam and Jetsam questions. Can you name a difference between the three albums that you recorded, that you played? The difference between not only the sounds, but the themes.
Well, the themes, certainly the End of Chaos. I mean, I would say a lot of the themes, I don't think we've varied too far in terms of the themes. And the only thing I will say is that on every album, the themes are fairly wide range. If you look at the lyrics, like we're not just talking about one thing, over an album. And somebody asked me on the new album, they said, well, is it a concept record? And I said, no, it's not. Like if you look at the lyrics, there's, it's a wide range of topics and subjects. So I think the End of Chaos was the first album that I had done with the band. And I was a big fan of the self-titled album. The drums for that album were recorded at my studio, and that was the first time I got a chance to hear AK, like his new voice, because he sounds different than he did back in the day. And I love the way he sounded back in the day, but I really love the way he sounds now. Like when I heard that self-titled album and I got a copy of it, because again, we did it in my studio. I put it in my car, and it was in my car for months, and that's unusual for me. I was listening to that. I loved that album. I thought it was a great album. So when we had the opportunity to do the End of Chaos, I was very excited about it. And, that album, it was, again, just went together really easily. The chemistry between AK, myself, and Steve and Mike was very strong right off. And the album just kind of flowed out. Like a lot of times when you're making an album, it can be a difficult process. And people will tell you that, like this song was easy. It just popped out. These other ones we had to really fight with. And the weird thing about these Flotsam albums is they really sort of just came out very easily. And then when we did, so we were very happy with the End of Chaos. We were like, wow, this is a killer record. And everybody agreed with us, and everybody loved the album. And then it came time to record Blood in the Water. And we're like, what are we going to do now? How are we going to top this record? And we had no idea. We said, well, we'll just write songs that we love and hopefully we top it. And then so we put out Blood in the Water, and everybody's like, oh, this is better than the End of Chaos. This is Blood in the Water. This is a great album. This is, awesome. And And so then, the same thing happened on this one. We're like, oh, okay, I Am the Weapon. Like on this album, we were definitely concerned again, like how do we ramp this up? So honestly, what we did was just not really worry about it. We just tried to make songs and overwrite for the album. When I say overwrite, like write too many songs, and then you can really concentrate on the songs that just start moving you and start popping out. And so that's really what we did, on this last album. So, but I think the differences are, I think now, we've sort of hit a stride, and there's a lot of, people at the label and also critics that we've talked to, and they have the record ahead of time, and they're saying like this is their favorite Flotsam album ever, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing to hear, because, and I just said this in an interview earlier today, but when somebody says they love your newest record the most, it's hard with a band that spans 40 years, because those first two albums for most people are something they knew when they were young. And so when you hear something when you're young and you love it, it has a special place in your heart. Just like for me, Moving Pictures from Rush, I was young, there's a special place in my heart. I don't think they ever did a record after that for me personally that I said I like better than Moving Pictures. So when somebody says they like, I Am the Weapon better than any Flotsam album, I'm like, wow, that's very impressive. So hopefully we did our job, and hopefully people love the record. I guess we'll find out soon.
And talking about the favorite albums, I would like to say that my favorite albums, you recorded two of them. The album Será from the House of Lords and Bonfire Fireworks. The
Great
two
choice.
best albums. It's in my top 20 albums. Let's talk.
Great. Fantastic.
Could you tell us what's the recording process that time, playing with the guys in the band about the two albums? Because we didn't have too much information about the two albums.
Okay. So which one?
I love so much.
Which one do you want to tackle first?
Yes, you could say about the House of Lords.
Okay, House of Lords. Sahara, in my opinion, that was the best House of Lords album, ever. And I think because the process was, we were very much a real band at that point. On the first album, we had to do it so quickly. I think we did the whole album in 28 days. We didn't really know each other that well. I mean, we knew each other, but we hadn't been touring a ton together and all of this. And so on Sahara, we had toured a bunch, and we had rehearsed a bunch, and we had demoed a bunch of songs together, and we had worked on songs together. And back in that day, you didn't have Pro Tools, so you had to get your arrangement right, in the rehearsal room. So that's a Sahara album. The reason I think that's one of the strongest albums, period, from House of Lords is it's five guys in a room rehearsing, playing all the parts together, working on things together, making changes together, honing the songs, just like, like the old days, like whether you're doing like a Led Zeppelin album or, like that's the way they did albums back then. And that's the way we did that album, which was the late 80s. I think it was 1990. So the thing I think on that album that made it sort of special was just that process. That process was very organic. We had an Akai 12 track, which was it had like this little videotape tape that you put in, and you had 12 tracks. So we had to do things in a very efficient way. And a funny story that not too many people know is our biggest single was a remake of Blind Faith's "Can't Find My Way Home," and that recording is the demo that we did, because Gene Simmons loved James's vocal on that. Loved the vocal, and that was done with like a 414 and a DBX 160 XT and a Neve module in our rehearsal hall. And, everything was recorded, just very, very, I don't want to say, I guess caveman is a good word, very, very old school, very low technology. And So we took that demo and we tried to re-record it in the big studio on the 32-track digital machine with Andy Johns, and it just wasn't the same magic. So we took the 12-track Akai, which we did the guitars, the lead guitar, the keyboards, the bass, the vocals, the drums I was playing electronic drum pads because that's all we could do really when you only have 2 tracks to record drums on. So the drums we had to redo, and we had to redo the bass, but everything else on Can't Find My Way Home is that 12-track demo that we did. And then when Gene Simmons came into the studio, he was telling James the last time, he's like, yeah, I want you to get that, thing in your voice where it sounds like your voice is just gonna burn out any second. And he goes, that's on that demo. I want to get that. I want to hear that. And so Gene Simmons comes in the studio and he looks at James and goes, you did it. You got it. And we didn't really want to tell him, well, that's the 12-track demo that we put on the 32-track machine. We redid the bass and drums and mixed it, and that was our biggest song ever. So it goes to show you that, if you listen really closely on the CD, you'll hear the hiss, like the little hiss in the background on that song. There's more hiss on that song than there is on the other songs, like a lot. And but the thing is it doesn't matter. The song turned out great. It was great emotion and great feel. And so anyway, that's for Sahara. I think that's one of the things that made that album special, was just we were a real band. We were really touring. We really knew each other musically and as friends. And I think it made for a great album. And then Bonfire is a little bit different process, because I was called in by Michael Wagner to play drums on that album. And it was a little strange for me because, they had a drummer, and I guess they weren't getting along or something. And Michael Wagner, wanted me to come in and do the drum tracks. We had just recorded Raise Your Fist and Yell, and he knew that I was very good in the studio. This is back in the day where, I could play to a click. I could play ahead of it, behind it, on it. I was very good at, still having a great groove and playing to a click. And back in that day, you couldn't fix it. Like, there was no Pro Tools, Beat Detective, any of this stuff. If you had drums on an album and you didn't have a good drummer, that ruined your record. So I think that's why they called me in for that album. I was more of a session player at that time in Los Angeles. But it was a different process. I mean, they have the songs pretty much done and all the guide tracks laid with clicks and some guitars and some vocals. And I went in and, like, I think in 2 days, I think I played, pretty much the whole record, and it worked out really well. They were really happy with it. The bass player always was telling me, man, I just love these fills you put in. And he would air drum the fills because he was the bass player. I think they were very, very appreciative of my work on the album, which was very nice. That album went gold in Germany, by the way. It's one of the gold records on my wall.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
So last week you had news about Jack Russell's health problems. So how are you feeling about these problems? How did you receive? How did you feel about this?
Well, I've toured with Jack for the last 3 years, and wonderful guy, one of the greatest singers, rock singers of all time, in my opinion. I think just an incredible singer. Very sad news, obviously. They put out the public statement, and they said what the diagnosis is, and I think all the fans are looking that up now, and so I've been hearing what that is, and of course, it's not a great diagnosis, and certainly our thoughts and prayers are with him. I want him to get better and recover completely, and that's what our thoughts and prayers are for. I'd like to see him completely. I'd like to see the diagnosis be wrong. That does happen. Sometimes doctors say you have this or you have that, and they're not right. So that's what we're hoping for. But yeah, it's very sad news. It's very sad when you have to stop doing what you love doing because of your health. And we're all going to come to that point. I'm going to come to that point too, where like maybe I'm not able to play at the level that I want to be playing at, and I'll have to say, you know, goodbye to the fans, and you know, those days are coming for all of us. So, you know, it's very sad, and it's unfortunate, but you know, I do feel that if he feels that he's not singing at the level he wants to sing at, then you know, yeah, that's the important thing. It's like, how do you feel? You know, like when I feel like I'm not playing at the level I need to play at, you know, I'll be saying that about myself, and I'll say, okay, it's time to call it a day. I hope that's far in the future, you know. I hope, but you don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. And it seems that guitarists love work with you, not only producers or a band as well. And you recorded several albums with Impellitteri, Chastain, both very different with each other. But what was like in work with them?
Sure. Dave Chastain, awesome guy, a perfectionist, very meticulous in the studio, had very specific ideas of what he wanted to hear, and very organized. He had everything laid out, everything recorded. I think one of the albums, he had all the guitars done, and I had to lock my drums to the guitars that were already there. I think it was the instrumental album. So very, very efficient in the studio, very professional, and a good guy, you know, a good guy to work with. I was going to say, maybe not the most funny, not a big joke kind of person, you know, in terms of humor, but certainly a wonderful human being, and very pleasant to work with, and some great memories for me. So I really enjoyed working on all of his records.
Nice.
Yes.
So let's talk about your influence as a drummer. You mentioned about moving pictures for Rush. I think that Newport is your favorite, the drummer.
Well, I'm not sure he's my favorite drummer, but he's definitely one of the drummers that influenced me, for sure. Yes. I will say that you know, I've had other drummers that are very big influences as well. But certainly he's one of the major influences. Buddy Rich is maybe my favorite drummer of all time, and he's jazz, so that's a whole different thing. But when I was young, I learned I was learning about drummers like Buddy and Steve Gadd and Tommy Aldridge, and like just a wide variety. I love Neil for his composition. I think Neil's composition and ideas, and the other thing that's great about Neil is that he sort of opened the door for drums to be more than just a rhythm track. It opened the door for drums to actually be orchestrated and to have real parts, and to have those parts very well thought out and more complicated, and more interesting than had been in the past. So I think he cut a path that no one had cut before, and I think everybody, to some degree, you know, if you're playing metal, you've been influenced in some way by Neil Peart. I think, in my opinion, like any of the metals. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No problems. You can continue. No.
But anyway, I do have a lot of other favorite drummers. John Bonham is another favorite drummer of mine. I mentioned Tommy. I mentioned Steve Gadd. Steve Smith is another great drummer. You know, there's so many. I mean, Stuart Copeland, you know, back in his day, I thought was exceptional, very different, very unique. So I've had lots of different influences over the years, and I still continue to. You know, like if I see something on YouTube and the drummer's doing something that I really am impressed with, you know, I'll look at it and go like, okay, what can I apply out of that to what I do? I don't think you're ever done learning, and I don't think you're ever done going like, okay, I'm finished. You know, I'm never going to, you know, add anything to my repertoire. So what I try to do is look at what other drummers are doing. If I see something I like, try to be influenced by it, but then make something out of it that's mine and not theirs. You know, I don't try to copy them. I try to take what they do and then make something that's unique and mine.
Yes, because I asked that question for you because I am not a drummer or something like you, or I'm not a big player. I just play here some jigs here, not big, something like big. So, but because if you ask that question for me, sometimes ago, years ago, like I don't know, maybe 20 years before, I'd say I have names like Bill Wizard. Oh my God, I want to play like Bill Wizard. I want to play like Ian Pace. I would like to play like that's classical ones. But I think the list always changes the time by time, because nowadays, as I'm a 37 now, I have other players very different from the days that I was used to play when I was learning. So today I listen something like jazzy. I love jazzy nowadays, like something like Simon Phillips for me is the best one.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Simon. Yeah, Simon's awesome too. Yeah,
technical. It has the feeling, and Jeff Porcaro, because I'm a big fan.
Oh yeah, Porcaro for sure. I mean, Simon I love for his brain. He's very fluid and very creative.
Yes.
He comes up with some really crazy stuff, and so yeah, I have a lot of respect, and I really love his playing too. So yeah,
and it's something like very good because but as you said, you learn it every time you're learning something, or you are hearing something new, and oh my God, that sound, oh my God, that's jazzy, this little poppy. So that's fantastic, That's why I asked you. In my opinion, I always change my my favorite top of drummers, That's
absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely, as you should. I mean, and I think that's the thing, as you progress and as you grow as a musician.
Yes.
There's certain musicians that are going to really speak to you at a certain time, and then as you progress, maybe they don't speak to you as much. And I think it's also very important to you have to take drummers in their time period. Like if you look at Gene Krupa, who was the drummer who originated the modern drum kit with the kick drum. He was the first one that used a kick pedal in a recording studio. And he basically, if you look at his setup, his traditional grip, but if you look at his setup, the snare drum, the tom, the floor tom, the kick drum, the ride cymbal, the two crashes, the hi-hat, he basically is the father of the modern drum kit, so that's something that I think, but if you listen to his playing, back in his day, he was incredible. And you listen to it now and it seems very simple and seems very basic compared to what we're doing now. Everything gets better and better as time goes on. Just like athletes, every year they're breaking the Olympic record. That's why Buddy Rich freaks me out, because Buddy Rich was born in 1917. And if you listen to his solo now, he still mops the floor with 90% of drummers. It still mops the floor with all these guys, and he's been dead for 30 years. So he was really, truly, in my opinion, maybe not only the greatest drummer, but maybe even the greatest musician, because 30 years after he's dead, we still listen to him, and it's phenomenal, and it's something that we're learning from. And I'm trying to think of other musicians, like, you look at guitar players, and, I think Eddie Van Halen was probably the Buddy Rich of guitar players, because for an entire 14-year period after he showed up, everybody was influenced from Eddie Van Halen, whether you were George Lynch, whether you were Bruce Kulick, whether you were, no matter what guitar player you were, Yngwie, everybody was influenced by Eddie Van Halen to some degree. So, I think he was kind of the Buddy Rich of guitar players. And I go back and I just listened the other day to Van Halen 1, and I just went, I remember being a kid. I lived in Washington State, and I was at Lake Sammamish, and it must have been summer of probably 78 or 79. I'll have to see when that album was released, but there was a van that had speakers on the back, and I had never heard Van Halen before. I was playing Frisbee with a friend, and Eruption came out, and I literally stopped and went, "What is that?" Like, and I'm a drummer, so that shows you the impact that one player can have that really pushes the envelope and makes something new and different. That's so far ahead of the game. I just think it's still amazing to this day. You know, you go back and listen to that first album, it's still an incredible record. What is it? 40, let me think about it. 44 years later or something. It's still an incredible record.
Yes, you're right. And talking about the Flotsam and Jetsam, back into the Flotsam and Jetsam stuff.
Yes.
Sorry. Do you have plans for the tour? You have dates?
Yes, we do. We toured the U.S. Earlier this year. We obviously went to Brazil for Summer Breeze. We went to Europe for Grass Pop Festival. We're going to be going back again for Wacken and Dynamo Festival, and we'll be playing some other shows along with that. And then I don't know if we're going to have time off or not. So far we do not have dates in the fall yet, but we may. There's some things that are in the works, but nothing announced yet. And then we also are playing the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise. That'll be in January of 2025.
Great. So let's go into the last question we just made with our interview. Okay. And what's the 3 best albums of all time for you, Ken? Could be 4, 5, but
could be 4 or 5. Well,
10.
Yeah, I mean that's really tough. I mean, I'm going to say some albums that might be. You know, the problem is they're so huge. You know, when you have albums that are so huge, like, you know, you say Metallica, the Black Album, you know, like everybody's going to go, yeah, duh. You know, it's like, so I wish I had some unique albums that, you know, like, but I always think of, you know, the albums that were like the debut albums or maybe like the Black Album that had such a big impact that it couldn't be ignored. You know, that's certainly one of the albums for me. Certainly Rush Moving Pictures is one of those albums for me. Van Halen 1, I think, is just a masterpiece. And I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but I think that was their best album ever, period. I mean, you know, you always have years to write your first album. And then, you know, I mean, I think 1984 was another great album, but I think that first album, there's just something there that I don't, in my opinion, I never heard them play quite like that again. I'm trying to think of some more albums that would, you know, obviously there's some Iron Maiden albums. There's a lot of them. Judas Priest Unleashed in the East was another phenomenal record. And I got to see them in Seattle when I was very young, and they played the Seattle Center Coliseum, and it was an incredible experience. I never did get to see Iron Maiden, unfortunately, which was really, really too bad. I did see Queen, but those albums are kind of weird for me. I have a love-hate thing with Queen. Like, some of the songs I just love, and then other songs I'm like, yeah, you know, Ride My Bicycle. Yeah, I don't know. Not, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's certain songs, you know, Fat Bottom Girls. Yeah, I don't know. It's like certain songs I just kind of am not into. But then you go, you know, then you look at things like, you know, Keep Yourself Alive, or, you know, Killer Queen and stuff, and you just go, you know, genius, you know. So there's a lot of different music that speaks to me. I mean, I listen to jazz, I listen to fusion. I was raised on stuff like Return to Forever and Yes, and, you know, there's just so many great albums. It is really hard to narrow it down. But if I had to narrow it down to like 3, I'd probably say maybe Moving Pictures, maybe Van Halen 1, and maybe the Metallica Black Album. I think those 3 are 3 albums that will be forever ingrained in everybody's psyche. I don't know of any musicians that aren't, you know, fully aware of those records. So I'll leave it with those.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, Ken. You were very gentle with us. You're very kind. Thanks to. Nachi, you want to say goodbye too? Thanks.
So let's say thank you to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to meet you, and I hope you see you here in Brazil. So
yes, I hope we get to see each other. All get to see each other in Brazil, and you know, we did love that show, and we've talked with our agent that we do want to do some more shows in Brazil. So hopefully that happens, and hopefully we get to see you guys in person.
Yes.
So,
Thank you so much. You guys have a
Thanks
great
so much.
have a great
Bye-bye.
rest of your evening. Bye bye.
for
Yeah,
you too.
bye-bye.
Bye bye.